hopping back to last week, our friend Seb, who came over here to talk to us from Antora Energy, hitting on a little bit of everything of what it means to have an entrepreneurial mindset, the different startups and companies that he's worked at, Activate, the program that he founded. When we started this class at the beginning of the semester and I asked you guys what you want to learn, what you most want to know, a lot of you talked about networking, relationship management, reputation, and the like. Usually, I write down a whole script of things I want to tell you about in an intro and things I want to say. I don't need that for Jules because she's that amazing. This is somebody who, out of all the hundreds of alum who I get to work with, stands out from the crowd. Incredibly empathetic, incredibly thoughtful, leadership-oriented, all of those things, and yet incredibly business savvy. She got a BFA here after she grew up in Detroit. She took herself here, put herself through school to get her BFA, and then went on to go to HBS, Harvard Business School, some other school on the East Coast, not as good as Michigan, we know. She went on to found a couple operations. The most notable company you've probably heard of is called the Grommet, that was then acquired afterward. She has generously come back to higher education because she likes to help people like you be ready for the future and be entrepreneurs yourself. She's now working as an EHour at Harvard Business School again, and joining us here on a snowy day in Ann Arbor. Please help me welcome Jules Pieri.
Eric alluded to this, but man, I forgot how tough Michiganders can be today. I was reminded I'm staying in my brother's house in Plymouth. That's about a half hour away. And I ducked out for coffee 4 miles away. Easy, right? And I haven't driven in that kind of snow in years. And we've gotten really soft in Boston. We don't get much snow. And there were literally cars like careening off, you know, here or there as I was just driving the 4 miles. So that was my big reminder, like, whoa, it's different here. And then I was thinking about coming here and figured, man, if there are 5 people in that auditorium, it's going to be great because it's impossible out here. And look at you. I'm so pleased. And here's what I can tell you. You are the real entrepreneurs already. I know this about you because a big part of being an entrepreneur is doing the hard thing, doing the uncomfortable thing. It was not easy to get here, so thank you. One other thing, I used to look like this like 3 weeks ago until I kind of bleached the heck out of my head and got rid of all my hair. But I left the photo because I love my Michigan earrings there that I'm wearing. So it's a better photo than what I would have probably put up there. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my background, and I'm really looking forward to the chat with Eric. But to set context, I guess, for some of the things we're going to talk about, Eric mentioned that I grew up in Detroit in that house. And that street, it's on the west side of Detroit, and it's a very typical Detroit kind of street. It's a series of bungalows that were built after World War II for workers coming from all over the country, mainly the South, separated by about a driveway. And everybody on the street was either, like my dad, an auto worker, or some other blue-collar job, or an administrative assistant, something like that. When we had snow, actually, the street, I don't know why, the city of Detroit never plowed it. So it was this art to like gun it down that driveway and into the 2 really deep tracks that would be in the middle of the street. And that was impressive, but what was more impressive is that my dad, who was a toolmaker at Ford Motor in Livonia, he was such a steady person. And I have this ring that Ford Motor gave him that I wear on days that I think are going to be hard to remind me of him, because it has a 30 carved on it. And it's for 30 years of perfect attendance at work. And that was very important to me as an entrepreneur. It still is, that sort of role model. And when I was living in that house and going to Detroit public schools, one of the things that occurred to me was that I was getting tired of, it was a rough time to be in the Detroit public schools. I was getting tired of some of the stuff, like the violence, the drugs, whatever. And I decided to apply to Cass Tech, which is a great exam school in Detroit. Many of you probably know, so maybe some of you even went there. And one of my teachers told me about a private school in Bloomfield Hills called Kingswood Cranbrook. It's pictured up there. And I snuck behind my parents' back to apply, not because they were bad parents or I was afraid of telling them, but because I just didn't want to be told no, which is an entrepreneurial activity as well. Like, I had a big thing in my office, outside of my office, which was a quote from Rear Admiral Grace Hopper, which was something like, it was better to ask forgiveness than permission. So that's how I felt about applying to private school behind my parents' backs. I got a scholarship, and I would say those first 2 weeks there when I started forming my entrepreneurial cred, because I was a boarder, so far from home-ish, and certainly culturally very far from home. And the really big realization I had within a day or two is that I hadn't really had the preparation educationally required to get through that school. It's a rigorous place. And so for the first 2 weeks of school, I was nauseous every morning, like going to class, knowing if I was in Algebra 2, I'd never had Algebra 1, that kind of thing. And the tables turned about 2 weeks in when in English class, the teacher asked us who has done the summer reading. And we had Chaucer, we had Shakespeare, and I had literally cried through reading those readings, but I had done it all. And I was floored when I looked around the room, and when she asked that question, I was the only person who raised my hand. I was floored at two things: that they hadn't done it, and two, their confidence in admitting it. It was just stunning to me. But that's when I became an entrepreneur in a kind of teeny tiny way, because I realized then two things. First of all, I had investors. I actually had a scholarship to go to school there, so there were people who were backing me, and I couldn't let them down, even if I didn't know them. And that's what it's like being an entrepreneur. There are people all around you don't want to let down. I have a former Grommet employee here, Ian Markowitz, who was a fantastic early hire. I never wanted to let him down, and you never want to let your investors down or your customers down. So I had that experience. But I also was floored at their confidence, because I realized they didn't have they had a safety net, which I didn't have, which is also what it's like to be an entrepreneur. So applied to Michigan, got in, and that's when my experience of becoming the queen of rejection really started. It's a title I'm proud of, actually. It's not a negative to me. But when I was here, I realized that I could study industrial design across the road, actually, at the Stamp School. It's a profession I'd never heard of, didn't understand, but I was taking a sculpture class over there and saw models that students had made. And a professor encouraged me to apply, and I got rejected. And this is the lesson about this. Rejection is a huge part of the entrepreneurial journey. And when I was rejected that time, I told the professor, and he said something that I would have never known, which was the dean who was making all of the admissions choices was quite sick, distracted. Admissions were not his top priority. He was fighting for his life. And the professor told me, go at it again. I'll make sure that you actually get looked at, and I did get in. And that was a big entrepreneurial lesson for me. Again, not knowing it's a lesson. Most of the time when you're getting lessons, they're just happening. You don't know it's a lesson. But don't take it personally, and getting up one more time than you fall. That's what I did. Similarly, I got rejected to Harvard Business School the first time I applied. I was pretty ignorant, first person in my family to go to college. Didn't know that business schools really required 2 years of work, and I was applying right out of school. So again, just picked myself back up, applied again. And all those things mattered a lot to me when I was running the company that Eric mentioned, the Grommet. It's a product launch platform that in our instantiation launch one product a day. So products that you would know now, like I'm carrying a Swell water bottle, Fitbit, Bananagrams, Bombas socks, Simply Safe, an IoT product. Tons and tons of products became household names. But the journey to build that business and to keep it alive required me to withstand more with direct rejection than I would have ever imagined possible, mainly from investors. It was a hard, hard journey during the economic crisis to build a business that was really probably 2 or 3 years ahead of its time. We were the first company to introduce video to e-commerce. That sounds like a ridiculous claim, I know that. But it just didn't exist at the time, and we created an original launch campaign and video for every company that we worked with. Ended up, as Eric mentioned, I sold the company twice. We can talk about that because I know this class has a lot of interest in financing. I looked at your survey results. So sold it once to a Japanese multinational and then to Ace Hardware. Maybe the biggest rejection of all in my life was being fired by Ace Hardware. Happened in 2020. Essentially, the kind of conflicts that happen between an entrepreneur and a large company happened to me. Happy to talk about that. I moved on to become an investor at X Factor Ventures, and we invest in early-stage companies with billion-dollar opportunities and gender-diverse founding teams. And as Eric mentioned, I'm back at HBS as an executive fellow. So one of the things when Eric and I were forming, like what should we talk about, was the skills that it takes to be an entrepreneur. And I know the number one for me in life, but especially as an entrepreneur, has been the ability to build professional relationships. The shortcut is called networking. So I'm going to call this networking for introverts. And the majority of you are introverts. I don't know, does the class see their results when?
They haven't seen them yet. I'll send it out after.
Okay, so it's not a vast majority, but it's a somewhat majority in this class are introverts. So, as am I. And I think when you're an introvert, you think that networking is for someone else, or certainly something you're going to dread. And I'm hoping I can break that down for you because it's not. You can kill as an introvert. You can be even better in some cases than an extrovert at networking. So. Hopefully, I'll give you some transferable skills and lessons that I've put together. First of all, what is it? Well, it's not that image you might have of somebody who goes to an event or is in your life and is nothing but extractive. They're trying to give or get business cards, or they're trying to just know who you are and use you for all you're worth. It is not that. It is essentially a career and a lifetime of giving and receiving kindnesses. That's the bottom line for me of networking. And when you give those kindnesses, it's never because you expect something in return. And yet it's also something that, going back to the example of my father, I didn't grow up understanding. It was a hard time to get summer jobs when I was in college and high school, and I was in design school, and I saw this job at Stevens Design, which was a bike ride away from my house in Detroit. Check, I can do that. And it had an ability to give me some professional training. I'd only done things like waitressing and cleaning and things like that. So somehow I mentioned to my dad I was going to apply for a role there. And my dad, who had no meaningful professional network, turned out to know the owner of the business, Dick Stevens, because my dad had been super kind to his brother who had an illness, and my dad was an important person in their lives. And I told my dad, I'm going to apply to this business. He told me he revealed the name of, he knew the owner, and he said to me, like, the opposite of good networking advice. He said, don't tell him you know me. Like, what, Dad? I'm going to apply for this job. Your friend runs this business? No, you get that job on your own merits. And I say that's the opposite because generally the way things work is people appreciate a warm intro. It's credibility. It's a way to know, okay, I kind of have a framework for this person. My dad hadn't lived in that kind of world, so he just wanted, no nepotism, merits only. And I did get the job, and of course the man, I had a very unusual maiden name, probably knew all the whole time who I was, and he said something at the end. Of course he did. But that's the opposite of kind of going too far away from trying to appreciate what a network can mean. There are 3 R's, I would call it, in your career that matter. The obvious one I'm not going to talk about is a resume. It's kind of table stakes. It's what gets you in the door. And at your stage of life, you're probably mostly thinking about getting jobs, but it can be for other reasons. What really matters, though, is what happens after that resume gets you in the door, because the people you know and the reputation you've built are what either get you the job or the opportunity or the partnership or the conversation. So I'm going to focus on those. We're going to talk a little bit about building that network, because at your stage of life, many of you, not all of you, many of you are just starting out. And events are often a place that are a good place to begin extending your relationships. And I have kind of a playbook. I would call it the introvert's playbook. And you should totally steal this. When you're going to an event, first of all, be selective. Don't ever go to something that literally is just called networking. It's going to be deadly. It's not going to be the kind of event where you want to be, because networking as an end goal is useless. Only go to events where you care about the content, where you'll have something in common with the people there. So they don't have to even be business events necessarily, or professional events, but things where you're actually going to have enthusiasm and interest, even if the rest of the evening or the day is a bust. You'll be glad you went. If you can, and this is easier and easier, study the attendee list before you go. This takes time. This is the real work. For me, 100-person event, I might spend a half hour on that, and clicking through at times to the LinkedIn of the people attending, because then I can do the next step, which is reach out to them, the people that I've picked, which is my homework that I give myself, and this is still true to this day, is I don't want to attack a whole room of people. It's overwhelming, especially for an introvert. I'm going to pick 2 or 3 people that I think I could add value, they could add value, I'm just curious, whatever it is. I reach out to them ahead of time. In LinkedIn, you can usually get contact information and let them know, hey, I'm the person with platinum hair, I'm going to be there, I'd really like to talk to you. And people love that email. It's usually an email because they are feeling a little nervous too, extrovert or introvert. It's like, I might not know anyone there, I'd like to know somebody, and it's flattering when someone wants to meet you. Then I spend my time, when there's free time at the event, trying to find those 2 or 3 people. I usually can. Talk to them. I may or may not have been right about whether there was a connection to be had. It doesn't matter to me. I've done what I set out to do, and then I kind of relax at the rest of the event and meet whomever, who might even be more interesting, or I might be more interesting to them. But having structured an event instead of a big amorphous blob of people really helps me when I'm going to an event.
I want to build upon that just with a couple quick tactical notes for y'all. When you're doing that, one of the things I think that is in between the lines of what Jules was talking about there is you are looking for the opportunity to be memorable to that person. Doesn't mean that you have to be amazing, just means that you want them to think of you and for you to stand out in some capacity. So when you're doing that, one of the best things that you need to know is you have 2 ears, 1 mouth. Listen twice as much as you're talking to them, okay? When you're doing that, you're not just listening to what they say, you're trying to pick up on body language, you're picking up on tone, you're picking up on inflection, you're listening for terminology that they might use that you can go ahead and then take away to bring back into the follow-up that you have. Additionally, be cognizant of how you might be coming across. Are you dominating a conversation? Are you participating equally? Are you leading? Are you following? Are you validating what they're saying, or are you trying to dig deeper in a way that's inquisitive? Make sure, more importantly than anything else, to Jules' point, that you are genuinely interested in that conversation, in that person. I can guarantee if you're not, no matter how great you are at talking to them, it will come across. So thanks for letting me.
Thanks, Eric. And one little tactical thing. If it's a person who's maybe the speaker at the event, or maybe somebody that might be a little higher kind of status, or a little bit more accomplished or older, it's a really good thing to just say, hey, I know you're busy, especially if it's a speaker. If I could follow up with you later, I'd really appreciate it. If you could just remember, I'm the person who said they wanted to talk about XYZ, and I met you here, and I'll remind you of that. They're so grateful, because you can't really have a substantive conversation quite often, if it's a meaningful one you need to have at the event. But they're grateful that you pointed out you had a reason, you respected their time, and then obviously you have to follow up and do what you said. In terms of building your professional relationships, you actually have a great opportunity right here in terms of being students. Your fellow students ultimately will be your best network, bar none. So use the time here wisely in terms of making the friends that you obviously already are, but then staying in touch afterwards. But sometimes it's your professors, sometimes it's the parents of your friends right now. Some of you are undergrads, and you don't have the kind of people who are moving and shaking it yet at your age, of course, but their parents are. So it's a great way to get started. When you're actually in your first job, your customers and especially your service providers can be really great enhancements to your professional network. When you are looking to, take on a project, reaching back is really important. Reaching back, I mean, to people you used to know, staying in touch. Again, the same kind of people I mentioned before. So let's say your job is finding a job right now, and you're either in school or later you'll be in a job. I would set that up like a project where you have goals and targets. I have 3 sons, and one of them is often in a job search, and it's kind of overwhelming when you've got other full-time responsibilities, but treating it like a part-time job with set goals and responsibilities. For myself, when I'm on a project, I'm on a kind of wacky project right now for myself, and I'm setting a goal of 1 meaningful advance against that project a week. It's not something I'm going to spend full time on, but meaningful advance means talking to someone and a meaningful email against that goal. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on LinkedIn because I don't think it's as important as the other stuff, but the thing I love about LinkedIn is it's not as rigid as a resume. It doesn't have all of the rules, and I think there's a huge range of acceptability there. But if anything, I would solve for simpler as opposed to the detail of a resume. More importantly, I think the photo and the clarity and the errors or lack of are so important. So often when someone's looking to hire, when they get the stack of applicants, whether resume or LinkedIn, they're just looking for reasons to say no. And believe it or not, a single spelling error, a missing word, it's not fair, but this person is overwhelmed with choice. And and most jobs require attention to some detail, especially in early or entry-level jobs. So that kind of thing can really matter. And you can't do that by yourself. You have to have somebody else read your LinkedIn to catch those things. You read it so many times, you're going to miss those things. So ask for a tiny bit of help. One thing that's really important there, though, that's special compared to resumes is that you can take quizzes and get verifications of your skills, and then there's a way to self-identify your skills up to 50. Now, don't identify anything that's not true, but when recruiters are searching, they're searching by those skills terms. So take advantage of that opportunity. I have much more I could say here, but there's a lot of public information about LinkedIn, so I'll leave it at that. Let's say I'm going to stick to job search. You need to make an approach to someone. The ideal way, as mentioned before, is a warm intro from somebody you mutually know. Always the top choice, and LinkedIn's your best bet for trying to figure that out. Not always possible. Whether it's a cold approach, you're a stranger to the stranger, or an intro, I really have kind of a formula of how I like to reach out to somebody. It's going to be a really short email. Visually, it's about this big, 2 paragraphs, maybe 3 tiny ones. First sentence is going to be something about that person that's real, not just, oh, I really admire your accomplishments. I get those all the time, and I know it's just a bot or something. So something that this person specifically has done, is doing, has published. It could be a LinkedIn post, but something that is signaling that this is a real human being writing this. I'll give you an example. Ian, you know Julia Kemp. Julia Kemp became a founding team member at Grommet, and she was a student when she approached me. And she wrote to me and said, I really liked the blog post you wrote about XYZ. Well, I knew she was a human being who actually was paying attention. That's what I mean, that kind of thing, using human language. After that, talk about yourself. Include a link, a link to your profile, and 2 or 3 sentences about your objective and what it is about that person that is meaningful to you, and end with a clear ask so that you can be suggesting times or just saying, I'd like a 15-minute meeting. I tend to not suggest times in the first email, but it's not wrong to do that especially if there's an intro. I think when you're coming in cold, you might wait till till the response. So if you're on a campaign, say a job, think of it like a bullseye type thing. And in the first meetings you have, you want to sort of get the kinks out and get your story straight. And everybody needs that at every change juncture of their life. You need to become fluid, explaining your interests and explaining your background. So start in the outer ring of the bullseye with people who already know you and respect you, but will be honest. So not just tell you you're great and everything you said was perfect, but be a good sounding board. So that could be parents, or it could be people you've been in school with or professors. It doesn't have to be somebody who's in the field, but they can understand what you're saying and give you tips to make it smoother. After that, you go to the people who are connectors, because in the middle are the jobs. The middle are the people who are hiring, and the connectors are probably the people who are going to get you there quite often. And those are often the people I mentioned early, service providers, people whose job is to know a lot of people. So those are a good place to start to find the opportunities, other than the published ones, which of course you go after as well. And then in the middle, obviously, are the partners or jobs that you're looking for. So you have a meeting. Here's what you want to do. Seems kind of obvious, but you'd be shocked how many people come in unprepared. When I ran the grommet, I knew people were coming in nervous, and I wanted to sort of set the stage for a good conversation. So I'd have a few kind of softball questions, and one of them was, what's your favorite grommet? We launch one product a day. It's the easiest thing ever to answer that question. And I remember a person said to me, I'll get back to you on that. I'll have to take a look. What are you doing here? You don't know what we are, our company? You wouldn't do that. But be prepared with having understood some of the background or mutual connections you have with this person. And then when you come, don't think it's an amateur move to come in with questions. It could be written, they could be on your phone. It's respectful and impressive when people come in prepared like that. So don't think you have to keep it all in your head. And make sure you get some of those questions out, because don't be passive. You want to control some of the flow of the interview or the meeting, not all of it, but make sure that you're showing that you're there with a job to do, that you have a mission. Oh, and the last thing, this never happens. It's probably happened to me less than 10 times when I've met people who are networking to do something, is bring a list of people or companies you're targeting. And the reason that's so helpful is when you're sitting there and somebody's looking for help, it focuses the person across the table so powerfully. And it could be a short list at first. You might have 3 companies you have in mind because you're just getting started. It doesn't have to be 10 or 20. Ultimately, it will be. But every time you end a meeting, you're going to ask the person, what other companies or people do you think I should try to get to or think about or study? And then that list will grow exponentially really quickly. So when you go in, the first thing is when you walk into the meeting, you have to assume the person just came from just assume it's something difficult. Their kid just called them, they're failing, history class. They just had a tough meeting or an argument with, a business partner. Just assume the worst, because the point is that their head is not on your problem or your interest yet. Their head is somewhere else. So allow the first few minutes of the meeting to be kind of light. It's not that typical that somebody comes in and is kind of funny and jokey in a meeting where they might be nervous, but that's great. If you're a humorous person, use it. If you saw something funny on the way to the meeting, talk about it. Just do something to give both people, yourself included, a chance to just be in the room and start to focus before it's hard work, essentially. And then, as mentioned before, anything you can do to make the ask more accessible for the person, very bite-sized, do that for them so that they don't have to work too hard to solve your problem. So you have the meeting, you're going to connect on LinkedIn. A number of you connected with me on LinkedIn, which is such a badass pro move. Thank you for doing that. I don't know, did you tell them to do it?
No, that's the best part.
I'm going to apologize, though. I did not connect back. The only reason I didn't is because if I don't know the people that reach out to me, then my network starts to be diluted. So what you did was the right thing to do. I didn't connect back, but that's not on you, that's on me. So after a meeting, email back. Here's what you're going to assume. The person had this great meeting with you, and then they go back to their regular life, and they forget absolutely everything that happened in the meeting. They promised to introduce you to 2 or 3 people, and they never remember it again. Just assume that. So you're going to follow up with a very specific kind of reminder of the things they offered and a very forwardable kind of one paragraph ask to that person that they're going to introduce you to. You want your request to be the easiest task of the day for that person. They want to feel good about it. They love it when they can help somebody, but they don't want to work too hard. They want to have to think hard to describe you or your interests, so do it for them. Always include a link to your company or to your LinkedIn or both if it's appropriate. Let's say you do all that and nothing happens. I think this is just my rule. There's no set rule about this, but I think pinging, especially if there's some urgency, every 10 days is okay, and you can do it 2 more pings. If they don't do anything by the 3rd, you're just going to have to write them off and figure they don't get it. If it's not that urgent, you can go more than 10 days. 10 days, is kind of like I'm on a pace. I need to be on a pace. If you need to if you can let it go 2 weeks or 3 weeks between the pings, do so.
First off, I just want to say I've been in a network building, community building, relationship management type of professional role for 10 years at U of M. That last slide and everything that Jules is talking about, I could not add to in any way that is more substantive. That is spot on. The only thing I will say about it is manners will take you far. Be polite, both when you're in person, when you're in that email. It will stand out. Most people don't do that. Be prompt. Leverage the distinctions that you have. Don't hide them away. That's what's the kind of stuff that's going to be really memorable about you. And then I could not underline it more. Make it so easy for them to help you that it is just a no-brainer and takes them less than 30 seconds to do. I can't tell you the number of times I ask students to send me something forwardable. They want to talk to Jules. They want to be introduced to Jules. Cool, great. Tell me why you're interested in her specifically. Tell me what it is that really grabbed you, and then tell me when you're generally available so that I can forward that to her immediately and put her in a position to easily say yes. The number of students who then don't follow up or follow up in a way that isn't easily forwardable is the vast majority. Just by doing that little bit of extra work will make you distinguished.
And I had an example of a sort of a win and a fail with somebody just yesterday. Somebody I know well, he launched a product through Grommet while he was still in undergrad, and now he has a new SaaS business, and he wanted introductions to potential investors. And he did one thing really well and one thing not so well. The really well was, I said to him, I just kind of said, like, please send me a forwardable, that's what they call it. And I didn't really need to tell him that. He would already know that. And he said, yep, got it, ready to go, and I wasn't surprised. And he sent it within seconds after the meeting. That was the good thing, because in the entrepreneurial world, a 24-hour follow-up is normal, especially if you're looking for investors. The investor world uses that as a bit of a signal about your seriousness. So you want to be fast on those kind of things. And I'm shocked. I'm dealing in the academic world now, and I can't believe how slow follow-ups are in the academic world. So not that you're dealing with academics necessarily as students, but don't use school as the gauge. The business world, especially the startup world, moves at a much faster pace. So that was a good thing he did. The bad thing he did is the forwardable was a piece of crap. It was not forwardable. It had mistakes in it. It didn't really describe the business. He's a credible entrepreneur. This is his second business. I didn't mention that. And we had to go through 2 cycles of me coaching him on how to do a forwardable. So don't rush the forwardable just to hit the 24 hours or the 1 hour. Make sure that you're thinking about who it's going to and if it does the job. It didn't do the job, and he should have known better. And this is terrible, but I was going to introduce him to 3 people. I introduced him to 1 because I just didn't trust my precious relationships with him. And I know him, and if it was somebody I didn't know, I wouldn't have even done 1. It's that harsh. It's that hard because the relationships I've acquired have been my major investment of my career, the thing I'm proudest of, and my reputation. And I can't risk my reputation on his sloppy execution. That's the way it works. So you have to think that way, that this person's doing something really important for you, and to respect it at that level. Long term, this is how you actually maintain the relationships, and they become relationships when they're only just meetings at first. After you get help from someone, you always tell them what happened. I had the meeting with Eric. It was terrific. Here are the next steps. Thank you very much. That's the good. The better is to actually follow through, and this might take months. It could take a year to tell your person who introduced you or helped you what happened. And then the best is if you can remember, this person helped me a year ago, and send periodic updates about you. That's especially true when you're young. I don't get that as much from, seasoned, mature professionals, but when you're young, people are rooting for you. And I'm young, I'm saying like, I don't know, up to 50, or something. Like, it's not like it's only in your 20s, but as you're climbing your career ladder and people have helped you, if you can remember to send them updates, some people are very organized about this and they send it out once a year or whatever. That's not typical. But if you can do that, it's a pro move. You don't necessarily expect responses, a couple attaboys, attagirls, that's it. There's no action required. That's the beauty of it. The other person doesn't have to do anything. And that's what's even better about outstanding. And I do this a ton. I see articles or information or news clips or news announcements about people that have helped me or that I just, really, they're part of my life. And I send them something. It could be an email. I'm big on sending clipped articles as well, which is super old school, but it stands out so much. It stood me in good stead that I still do it. And they're not necessarily about business. Like, oh, you're going to Japan. Here's an article from Departures magazine about Japan, whatever. But those are outstanding things. You can't do very many of those, right? I mean, it has to be genuine. You have to have a reason to send it. But when you do. Oh, that's it.
All right, thank you, Jules. I'm so happy that you're here to talk about this here today because you are the master networker. You are the master relationship builder. One of the things that you've always talked about really ensuring that your network and your relationships are oriented around, and what you touched on at first there, was the giving and receiving of kindness. And students who are in a position now where they often feel like, I don't know what I have to give. I don't have any value. I haven't acquired a skill set. I don't have investor opportunity. What can they give? What can they bring to the table that they might not be thinking of?
Oh, it's honestly just you. It's so easy. And you guys have like this golden pass for even postgraduate for quite a while, which is you are living in a world that's different than a person at my age or Eric's age. You are seeing behavioral changes, technology changes that I'm not seeing, and they're interesting to me. And in your just casual discussion of your life, what app you used, for whatever reason, is valuable to me to know that. It's also important in most organizations to build a pipeline of talent. So even if you're not that minute the right person for a job in their organization, or maybe never, they still want to be able to have a pipeline or help other people with their pipeline. So you're enriching them as well. So you don't have to work that hard at it, really. Just do the things I said so that you use time well, but your own self will be, honestly, I'm not being kind of Pollyanna here. Your own self is truly enough. I'm doing this work at Harvard Business School. Why am I doing this work? This just takes time, and I don't need anything on my resume. It's because those students coming in my office are just super interesting to me. And all they have to do, and that's true, I do work at universities all across Boston and here. You're just interesting, just by existing. So claim that, and that's all.
Yeah, absolutely. When you're thinking about actually managing that network, to your point, you can send kind of the update emails with what's going on in your life. You can send a clipped article. You could comment on something that they had. How do you keep track of it in a way that actually has you touching and warming those relationships consistently? Like, how do you otherwise know that, okay, it's been 6 months since I talked to Joe, or a year since I said something to Mary?
I'm not as good as I used to be. When I was running a company, I had to have much better game, frankly, than I do today. And my own way of doing it, and there are surely better ways. You could use a CRM system like HubSpot. There are free tools out there as well that many people have recommended to me. But I used to just organize people in my Outlook by kind of affiliation, like a group of people who were journalists, a group of people who were fellow CEOs, a group of people who were investors, a group of people, future talent, like people that I just wanted to be able to, so this is where I organize their contact information. And so when I wanted to do kind of an update or like that, or just remember like, oh, who could help me with this? And I look at my list of other CEOs. So that's how I did it. But it doesn't much matter how you do it as long as you do it.
Yeah, and
you're probably better at this than I am, Eric, because you're in a job that requires you to be like pro level every day. Do you have any tips on that? Have you already
That's
told
very
this class about
generous
that?
of you to say. Well, the candid funny part is that you would expect our center to have a CRM. We have not had a CRM, customer relationship management system. And so I've typically relied upon LinkedIn and upon just the ability to efficiently surf my feed well enough and then send out those pings in a way that is efficient and quick. And I think to the point that you made earlier, it's situations where it's anticipating what the reader's either going to ask, going to have questions about, is going to want to do with that, or how I'm otherwise asking for them to respond. Maybe it's just me saying, hey, that new golden retriever you bought is unbelievably adorable. So happy for your family. Hope life's going great. But if it's something where it's, hey, Jules, I would love for you to meet Sarah, the student, because she's right up your alley and she's going to the same thing you're doing there. It needs to be thought out in a way that she doesn't need to take more than 30 seconds to respond to that. And I cannot emphasize that enough with what you said. I think that is just so mission critical about the affordability and the ability to respond with ease. And so many people do not take advantage of that.
But you just said something else is important. I was really not thinking about that. I am doing now my feeds. And that for me, that'd be primarily LinkedIn and Instagram. Instagram's a bit more personal of a feed for me, but it's not entirely. And I spend a lot of time on the homepage of LinkedIn, like every day, just sort of trying to see what's going on with people I care about. Because it does blend, like people do post their golden retriever there now, and I kind of don't mind. Some people hate it, but I don't mind what people post. I'm happy to see whatever they say. And I'll respond to the ones that interest me. But it's very interesting to me, too, how I post. I don't think I'm a heavy poster on LinkedIn, but whenever I do post, that's when all the opportunities happen for me. Like, oh, she still exists, or whatever. Like, people forget about you, and then the inbound happens, and it's not deliberate. I'm just literally posting, like I posted about coming here, something I'm happy about or I'm interested in, or an article that intrigues me. So I'm not looking for anything, but that's a good way for it to be a two-way street.
To take that into the real world and to take that into the notion of when you're asking or someone sends you an ask for a call or a meeting, I love that you touched on the notion of asking for an example of like 15 minutes for a call. I think that is just so critical. I talk to students about this all the time. Is 15 minutes, well, let's explain why 15 minutes and why it doesn't have to stay within 15 minutes. What was your thought process behind including that example? 15
is, if that's all you really need, that's all you should ask for. There are meetings that require more. Typically, when I'm going to do a pitch with an investor or an entrepreneur, it's going to be 30 minutes. And sometimes I'll do 45 if I think it's going to need that. The introduction's super strong or something about it grabs me. But 15, if it's just getting to know you and I have a kind of basic tactical need or something like that, or I'm trying to just get the meeting, 15 minutes is more than enough. But if the signals are from the other side that they're happy to keep going, be very conscious and offer to end the meeting at the 15 minutes anyway. If people do that, then they're not time wasters and you might go the extra 15, but if they seem like they're just going to roll forever, it's worrisome. And here's a pro move. Let's say somebody gives you more than 15 minutes, and let's say it's a 45-minute or half-hour meeting, and you really have kind of answered or asked all your questions in 20 minutes, offer to leave. I love those people who give me 10 minutes back. I practically want them to sit back down because I know that they get it. They kind of get people are busy, and I'm going to be safe introducing them to other people. But I used to advise one entrepreneur who routinely came in, I forget if it was an hour, ended 15 minutes early. And he never, ever stayed longer. I loved it about him.
And I think the context subtly wrapped in what you're talking about, what you're explaining here, is that there's really two elements that are of utmost value that someone has that you can ask for. It's their time, which is way more valuable than their money, because it's ultimately finite, and we never have enough of it, and everyone's always strapped for it. So if you're going to ask for it, you better have a damn good reason to ask for it. And then two, it's the social capital that they have built up with their relationships and their network. To Jules' comment earlier about the notion of someone asking for 3 introductions, you opted to make 1 because of the way they sent it, and if it wasn't somebody you knew, you would have made none. Is there anything more valuable than your social capital for anyone?
No, that's true for all of us, because I think what it's hard to know when you're still a student is where everything gets made or broken is that phone call or that email that someone sends when they're doing the back channel checking on you. You've applied for a job, your resume is you're qualified, and then if at all possible, a good hiring manager or business partner or future whatever is going to go on your LinkedIn and find people you know in common and ask them about you. You didn't give that name as a reference. You don't know that person is going to contact that person. And that's often, you don't get the job or you don't get the follow-up and you have no idea why. It's because that phone call didn't go well. And so at every level of every contact, of every role you do, you are trying to make sure that phone call is going to go well, whether it was a summer job, cleaning a summer camp, or, a professional role, that the person's going to say what you'd hope they'd say. And I know that's so basic. Your parents probably have all told you all that kind of thing all the time, but in a digital world, it's so powerful. Like, that used to always be true, but it was hard for a person to follow up on it. It's a piece of cake now to follow up on these backdoor references and back channel. It's called back channeling someone, back channel a person.
In a digital world, the genuine responses about you, the genuine interactions people have had about you and will share about you are that much more meaningful.
I'll give you an example. I'm on the President's Council for the University of Michigan. So it's a new body of people. I'm one of 2 alum representatives. I'm aware of staffing needs in the university I don't want to get too specific, and been asked to help with a search. And I do my own legwork and I'm finding these candidates, but then a fellow U of M grad I noticed knew one of the people I'm recommending for a role, and I emailed him to say, what do you think? And the accolades that came through the email were unbelievable. I didn't even need the call at all, but I had no idea this was going to happen. So that person that I've never met is now top of the list because someone I trusts him.
Yeah. After that initial entry-level job you get out of school, that reputation you have and your professional network is going to start to overshadow the value of your resume and of your LinkedIn, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I know we're over time, so I want to be respectful to that. However, I want one more minute here if we can talk. There's an element of Jules' story that needs to be told, and this is about the notion of not just talking about extending kindness and not just talking about what it means to exchange on that, but actually living that. Can you share with them a little bit about your story of taking in Afghanistan refugees?
This is a little bit of a surprise here. 2021, Afghanistan, Kabul was about to fall, and my partner Drew and I filled out a form to help out in Boston with any refugee arrivals, to house them. We got a call in October. The refugees started arriving in August and were processed in Texas. October, they started being fanned out across the country, not necessarily where they wanted to go. Most of them had no family or connections where they were going. We were asked to house a young couple for 2 nights. And long story short, we housed them for several months. The man was a former Army interpreter, U.S. Army interpreter. His life was at risk, and they were newlyweds. And they arrived, and I started quickly networking because I don't know how to help refugees. I don't have a single direct experience that would help me helping a refugee. So I started networking like crazy, asking people who knew people in social service agencies, who had the resources they needed. How do I help these people? And one person said to me, man, if you could keep them in your house for 6 months or 3 months or just anything more than 2 days, you have no idea how far that would advance their settling in this new country. So we did that. We have 5 children between us, but I consider Israel and Saida our 6th and 7th children. They're still very important to us. Now it's 2.5 years later.
That's Michigan leadership. Have a good weekend, everybody.